Its debut was supposed to be a triumph for the Russian defense industry, but for more than 10 years now, it has remained stuck at the preliminary testing stage.
Instead of the BMP-3, and even newer generation is coming, the Kurganets-25.
The saga of the Kurganets-25 has been ongoing since the 2010s. They openly and actively try to copy the vehicle from Western models of light armored vehicles, adopting all the best solutions from their competitors.
In terms of protection, the Kurganets-25 has no analogs in the world in its class of combat vehicles.
By the way, the same can be said about its production timeline. However, just the other day, during another exhibition in Minsk, Russia's Rostec unexpectedly announced progress on the Kurganets project. We decided to look into what exactly this marvel of Russian defense industry is, what this armored vehicle is capable of, when it might enter mass production, and most importantly, what its appearance on the front lines could mean for Ukraine. You can find out all about this right now on Arsenal. The fate of the Kurganets has been complicated from the very beginning. Work on its construction began in 2011, and 5 years later it was already supposed to be undergoing testing at the proving grounds. However, as is often the case, something did not go according to plan. At first, the tests were postponed for a year, but the engineers still didn't make it in time. However, they learned from this, so the new deadline was extended by 2 years right away. But even in 2019, the masterpiece didn't materialize. Postponing the test to 2021 didn't help either, they still didn't make it. And now, in 2025, Rostec's statement already sounds like a joke. Literally, the vehicle is already at the final stages of preliminary research. So either the state trials were postponed again, or they went on for all 4 years.
This vehicle truly has great potential. I think it will define the look of this family of medium-class vehicles and low-bearing platforms for several decades to come.
At the same time, it's noteworthy that the vehicle itself was actually assembled back in 2015. Its debut took place on May 9th during the parade on Red Square, and since then it was handed over to the army for field testing. According to official reports, the Kurganets performed successfully. However, why preliminary trials have still been ongoing for the following 10 years remains unclear.
An even newer generation is now replacing the BMP-3. This is the modern Kurganets-25 armored vehicle.
Now, let's take a closer look at what this vehicle actually is. Touted as an unprecedented sensation, the Kurganets-25 was supposed to become the new platform for modern Russian IFVs, APCs and BRDMs. However, in reality, it barely measures up to Western technology from the 1990s. The first difference that immediately catches the eye is the new ramp for troop entry. At last, the Russians have figured out to place it at the rear of the vehicle, rather than as it had been for decades before.
We can see from the layout, boarding and disembarking of troops is provided through a rear ramp, which is located at the back of the vehicle. This layout allows the troops to both disembark and conversely take their places in the troop compartment while being protected by the vehicle's armored hull from enemy fire coming from the front arc.
This solution, to put it mildly, is not new. The Americans came up with this for their MON 113 APCs back in the 1960s, but even in the 21st century, such a design can be presented as a sensation if we're talking about Russian equipment. The second unprecedented solution is an APC on tracks. Before this, after all, they were all-wheel.
And here is an armored personnel carrier that no one has ever seen before. That is, it's a tracked armored personnel carrier. Well, to put it bluntly, since our segment is called trucks and buses, this is basically a bus for infantry.
This bus for occupiers also supposedly has incredible armor, at least according to what they say back home. They even developed active protection specifically for this APC, which, by the way, has been used in Western models since the last century.
Just imagine the amount of armor, steel armor, 500 mm thick, and the weight of this block, which is only 30 kilograms. The operating principle is very simple. When a shaped charged jet hits the dynamic protection block, it triggers the explosive elements inside. As a result of the counter explosion, the jet is destroyed and does not affect the main armor.
The Kurganets also has a double bottom and seats that protect against explosions. They did not dare to follow the proven path and create a V-shaped hull in Russia. However, by adding an extra flat layer of armor underneath, they now claim that there is simply nothing like it in the world.
In terms of protection, the Kurganets-25 has no analog in the world in its class of military vehicles.
It is currently impossible to verify whether this is true. The Kurganets, which is undergoing endless testing, is not being allowed to the front. And that's a Shamitalist in words. The world has never seen a more deadly vehicle.
If the BMP Kurganets is equipped with cannon armament, then since this is an armored personnel carrier, in other words, it's not a vehicle intended for direct combat, but I repeat, a bus for transporting soldiers. Here, there is a small turret fitted with a large caliber quad machine gun. But the difference from all previous vehicles is that the turret is completely unmanned. In other words, let me repeat. The gunner is not there, he is inside, he sits in the hull.
This is how the man marvels at what the rest of the world calls a remote control module. By the way, the Ukrainian armed forces have already learned to install this even on drones. But that's not the point right now. Let's go over the specification. Kurganets is equipped with a 30mm cannon and a 7.62 caliber machine gun, as well as 4 Kurganets-EM missile launchers. In other words, it still doesn't measure up to the specifications of the American Bradley IFV, which the US has been producing since 1981. The driving performance of the Kurganets has earned particular praise from Russian reviewers. It can go through swamps, snow, and rough terrain. In other words, it can do everything that any tracked vehicle can. But of course, there has to be a sensation here as well. And it has been found, for the first time, Russia has abandoned the prehistoric lever system for controlling the trucks and finally equipped the vehicle with a steering wheel, panoramic cameras, and an automatic transmission.
Here, there is a fully automatic transmission, that is an HMTR hypermechanical transmission. Well, you could say it's kind of like the old Lear Z677 or like passenger cars with automatic transmissions. That is, you can drive it in manual mode, shifting gears yourself, or completely in automatic mode.
And finally, I'd like to recall a Russian saying, remember, what is it that doesn't sink in water? Well, that's about the Kurganets. It can also stay afloat and even move at a speed of 10 kilometers per hour. But as they say, only downstream.
All vehicles in the Kurganets family are amphibious, and they swim differently from previous armored vehicles, which used to move in water by rotating their tracks. These have a water jet propulsion system. Moreover, depending on the modification, additional armor can be mounted on the sides, and secondly, floats can also be attached.
But I repeat, the APC with floats is still in the development stage. No data regarding its actual testing has been provided in the 15 years since the project began. So, for now, the only things the Kurganets-25 is good for are parades, exhibitions, and serving as a prototype for origami.
And make it a nice khaki color. It'll look really great. It'll look like a real combat vehicle.
Did you like this video? If you enjoyed watching, then please be sure to give it a like and don't forget to subscribe to our Arsenal channel.
It was supposed to roll through the parade, destroy all the enemies at the front, and then return to the ranks in all one piece, without sustaining any damage. The pride of Russia with no analogs, which Putin never stopped praising, the T-90M Pro-Rev tank.
Now we can say that the T-90 ProRiv is the best tank in the world. As soon as it takes position, that's it.
Indeed, that's it, because it's gone, since this best tank is only good as a target, and the statistics at the front don't lie.
According to the well-known Oryx website, which is known for carefully tracking military equipment losses during our war since 2014, they report that Russia has lost at least 177 T-90 tanks of all modifications. Strangely enough, this turned out to be almost a shock for the Russians, since they had placed great hopes on this tank.
Once again, not all of the 177 tanks are ProRiv models. We're talking about T-90s of all modifications. And quite simply, there aren't even that many ProRiv tanks in Russia. But dozens, if not more, T-90Ms definitely won't be making it to the parade now. Why did the ProRiv turn into a failure? What are the weak points of Russia's best tank? And how many of these toys does Putin have left? All this and more, coming up in just a moment. The T-90M is a modernized version of Russia's main T-90 tank, which was originally developed back in the early 1990s. And those in turn are a modernization of the Soviet T-72 tank.
Actually, the T-90 tank isn't a Russian, or at least not a purely Russian design, right? The vast majority of their designs trace their origins, their roots back to Soviet times. For example, work on the T-90 tank was already underway in the Soviet Union. It began in the mid-1980s. At that point, to be honest, the Soviet Union was already on its last legs. They developed this vehicle, brought it to the stage of factory testing, to experimental models, so to speak.
There are about 8 known modifications of the T-90. Of these, the best was specifically the T-90M. The Russian army only received the first batch of ProRiv tanks in 2020. Another batch arrived in early March 2021. That same year, the tank was officially adopted by the Russian armed forces. So this is a very new tank, which means it should be the best on the battlefield.
The T-90 is one of the most modern developments of the Russian military-industrial complex, and it was given a very loud and formidable name, ProRiv, Breakthrough. But at the same time, it is a modification of the old T-72 tank. And although it is now equipped with a more powerful engine and a new turret with elements from the T-80 tank, it has retained all the shortcomings of Soviet tanks.
The new features of the T-90M include the turret, a new multi-channel sight that can be used at any time, and the Kalina fire control system. They claim that the ProRiv can launch high-precision reflex missiles with a range of up to 5 kilometers directly from the main gun. The tank is also equipped with the Relict reactive armor system. As usual, in Russia, this is presented as having no analogs. The name itself is amusing, since the word relict actually means something outdated, a relic of the past. Although, in general, it fits. In reality, this protection doesn't save the tank.
The T-90 has 3 levels of protection, 3 so-called layers of defense. But the problem is that the upper hemisphere, basically the turret roof, is not protected by anything. And experience with the use of javelins and NLAWs has shown that so far, nothing can protect this hemisphere.
It can be hit by both FPV drones and regular cannons. And as the maestro once said about German aces, they burn like a charm.
In fact, the issue of protection is consistently cited as one of the main reasons for failure at the front. In several instances, some tanks were completely destroyed in combat by less powerful combat vehicles, for example, such as the American BMP M2 Bradley. Moreover, it should not be forgotten that, just like the Soviet authorities, Russians do not care at all about their crew. Protecting the equipment is more important to them. Even Putin did not try to hide this.
One of the commanders said, unfortunately, the tanker was killed, but the tank, the T-92, hit a landmine. Well, apparently it just flew up there. Well, the person just got injured while he was there, not from a combat shell, but just hit himself hard, that's all. The tank remained operational.
The tanker is expendable after all. The tank itself is a different matter. But even the latter has problems with protection. One of the tank's critical problems is said to be the vulnerability of the ammunition stored inside the hull. A fire caused by a hit can trigger a detonation. The turret just gets blown off.
Unbelievable. It just toppled over like a Chupa Chups, hitting the ground.
And this is exactly where we come back to Russia's best dynamic protection system, Relict. No analogs, remember? Well, in this case, instead of dynamic protection, the tank ended up with bricks.
It is really incredible protection, bro. This protection is just bricks.
As you might have guessed, protection isn't the only problem with the ProRev. Even the T-90M engine power doesn't make it more maneuverable than its Western counterparts. The tank also has limited thrust and reverse speed. It doesn't have a reverse gear, and the much-touted Kalina fire control system is equipped with relatively poor quality monitors, and performs badly in dynamic conditions, just like the new Russian radio communication system. Overall, a Russian-style breakthrough. There's no point, just a lot of noise. Tank crews realize this from time to time, which is why they abandon their T-90Ms. In such cases, the tanks are completely intact, which means they can now serve on the side of good. At the very least, it's nothing to feel sorry about. Another problem with these tanks is that many have been destroyed, while production is lagging behind. It was previously reported that Russia produced 40 T-90Ms per year before the start of the full-scale invasion. In 2023, their production supposedly reached the level of 60 to 70 units per year. But there's also an interesting detail here. Out of every 4 T-90Ms produced, both before the invasion and during it, 3 were made by upgrading T-90As taken out of storage, and only 1 was built from scratch. We won't even attempt to comment on that kind of quality. But you can share your thoughts in the comments. Let us know what you think of the ProRev tank. And don't forget to like this video and be sure to subscribe to our Arsenal channel so you don't miss any of the most interesting content.